know, it's interesting. I apologize if you've heard some of my rants before with regard to this, but you know, a few years ago, you'd come to a security conference, and you know, we were still kind of embryonic and figuring out some of the science behind what we do, and people would be making fairly not well-founded claims of things like 1 and 1 is 3, and everyone would write it down and think it was the neatest thing, and the press would report on it and whatever. Now we're kind of in a different situation where there's a whole hell of a lot of money in what we do. You know, if you're an IT specialist working in a large corporation securing your enterprise, or if you're working at a vendor or whatever, there's a lot of money in the security industry. Turns out that it behooves us all to say things are really bad and you need to secure your stuff and you need to pay us a lot of money. Period. You know, if we didn't say that, a lot of us wouldn't be here. We'd be at some marketing conference down the street. And because of that, it's amazing how well, you know, kind of camouflaged a product pitch or some kind of pitch can be under the guise of altruistic security concerns. I've been accused of maybe being a little too hippie altruistic in my life, and there are times when I kind of enjoy that. I encourage you to, there's a little hippie in all of us, so, you know, and hopefully it wasn't like conceived last night. Anyway, I think that, you know, please be cynical when you're watching these talks. You know, if you go to DEF CON and you're sober enough to go to a talk there, be cynical when you watch those. And anyone in here own a Volvo P1800 or 1800 besides me and my wife? All right, that's the Swedish car I referred to at the bottom. It's this really old car that was in the old Saint TV show Roger Moore drove, not the one with Val Kilmer, Roger Moore, back when he was cool. And it's a neat little car. Mine has a hole that big in the driver's side floor pan, just to give you an idea of how bad a condition it is, but I'm slowly restoring it. Anyway, I'm going to cut to the chase because nothing really annoys me more than coming to a conference and having 6 tracks and having to sit there listening to some goofball on stage talk and wonder for the first 40 minutes, is this hour and a half going to be worth it? So I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to tell you right now in little tiny bullet points, and then you can decide. And if there needs to be an exodus, like if you think you want to go learn about Ajax hacking or something else, I won't hold it against you. I'll just me and the Shmoo group will beat you up in the back alley later. It's okay. Most effective way to prevent Bluetooth attacks, plain simple, turn off discoverable mode. Boop, there. I've said it. Most useful piece of Bluetooth security knowledge you'll get today. I swear to God. I'll have some demonstrations on that in a minute, but that's just the quick bullet. There is no code release today. We tried to actually make a defense kit. One thing we did a few years ago was release this thing called the Hotspot Defense Kit, which was basically a proof of concept to say, hey, there's no client-side Wi-Fi protection. All these clients are sitting in, Starbucks or wherever, and there could be rogue AP attacks going on against them, and nobody sees them. What's up, Mr. Dave? So nobody could see them. So let's, go and write some code. We'll release it under the BSD source license and hope somebody picks it up and puts it into some product or something. And we ranted and raved about it. And, the idea was it was usable, ran on OS 10. There was a little red ball or a little green ball. Green was good, red was bad. Okay, this is not complicated. And if the ball went from green to red, you should stop using the network, okay? And there'd be a little thing would pop up if you wanted to, and it could shut down your interface. And it was all whiz-bang dandy. We wanted to do the same thing with Bluetooth, and we managed to actually do what we did with Wi-Fi without having to reverse engineer anything, without having to use any crazy device-specific nonsense. We were just able to use the exposed dev interfaces that were already there. Not the case with Bluetooth. We tried experiment. It was just basically put our heads down, grind through this thing, see what we can make happen. Tried it on Windows for a goodly long time, failed. The gentleman who helped me out with this, his name is Will Davis. He's not here today, but he used to be a coworker of mine. Probably one of the best Bluetooth coders I know. He knows security, he knows how to write Bluetooth, and he wrote me the other day basically in tears. So we're not going to have a code release. We're still going to have some pragmatic defense things to do. We've got some ideas on how we're going to move forward now. Now we actually know we have to do device-specific stuff, and we're going to have to do crazy things, but I'll get into that later. And then finally, damn near every vulnerability is an implementation error. Bluetooth protocol itself, on the face of it, is okay. There haven't been major cracks found in it yet, but the protocol itself is complicated and hard to implement. How complicated is it? So this is like a Johnny Carson thing. It's complicated. How complicated is it? I should be wearing the little turban and everything. Sorry, humor gear still finding traction. Aren't many Johnny Carson fans left alive, I guess. Whew. the Bluetooth stack is a lot more complicated than the typical IP Ethernet stack that we know and love. Okay, I've kind of ranted about this before. You know, the IP stack that we have has been, you know, 30 years of work on it. People are generally pretty familiar with it, and it kind of makes sense. You can look at it and there's this nice strata. Well, at some point, you know, I've been ranting about how bad the Bluetooth stack is and how hard it is to implement. I figured, you know what? I've avoided drawing the stack because I didn't want to go through the effort, and I think I finally have to draw it myself. Like, I have to take all my PowerPoint foo and put 15 boxes on a page and call it a Bluetooth protocol stack. So I went to some of the books I have on Bluetooth, and I went to images.google and said, hey, let's search for Bluetooth stack. Well, before I show you that, let's look at some IP stacks that I found on Google. Here's an IP stack, okay? I will use my laser pointer to point flatly at this thing so it won't do anything. Woo, see, look at, I almost got it, there's a red dot. That's the OSI layers, right? And then on top of that, there's some, you know, this is actually the first hit for IP stack when you search on images.google. You got TCP, IP, you got your, you know, lower level Ethernet stuff. It boop, pops across the network, comes back up the other side. Not complicated, right? We've done this before. We've all internalized it. We have books now that don't actually have the OSI model in them because they assume we all understand this. Okay, next IP stack. A little more complicated. You know, for the application layer, we got FTP and Telnet and that kind of thing, and TCP and UDP, but it still breaks down pretty well according to the OSI model. You know, this again shouldn't look like rocket science to anyone. And you know, by and large, all of these diagrams, this is the Wikipedia IP stack. Note, it doesn't actually have IP on it anywhere. God bless you, Wikipedia. But this is, you know, these are the same things. It all makes sense. These don't conflict, right? There's no confliction. As a developer, I can read this and I can understand this. You have to give it to developers in little tiny chunks that are easy to digest, and the IP stack is easy to digest. Bluetooth. Okay. So here's a Bluetooth stack. I apologize if you have a hard time reading it from wherever you are. Some things to note. The, let's see, there's this TCS thing over on the side. There's the HCI, which is the host controller interface, which is below L2CAT. And then there's IP, which rides on top of PPP, which rides on top of RFCOMM. We'll get into what all these things are in a minute. Let's just take a little leap of faith like we understand what they all are, okay? So moving to the next, that was the first hit on images.google. The second hit, now we have IP riding right on top of L2CAT, not relying on PPP, not relying on RFCOMM. Fact of the matter is, you can do it like that, but you can also do it like the previous diagram did, where you have it on top of PPP, on top of RFCOMM, which is a serial port thing. Okay, that's kind of confusing, but at least most of the other things are kind of in the same place with some admissions, and that HCI thing didn't show up, but maybe it's not that important. Okay, here's another one. This one's really blurry, and I apologize, but I really want to impress upon you the L squared cap, which is below the orange bar, which is actually the HCI layer. So that's in direct conflict with two diagrams ago where we had the HCI layer underneath L2CAT. Okay, that's just the first 5 images on images.google as a sampling of what a Bluetooth stack might look like. Okay, so we have left the land of deterministic computing to non-deterministic computing. That's what Bluetooth is. So this is what developers have to stare down, and this is what they have to deal with when they're trying to write Bluetooth-enabled applications. Well, that's not a good start, right? Like I said, the core protocol that hasn't been broken, but the spirits of the developers have, and that's what's important. So let's go through a crash course. I gave a Bluetooth talk here 2 years ago, and we tracked people all over Black Hat, and after the talk, someone raised their hand and said, how do I configure my Wi-Fi radio to do Bluetooth? At which point I knew I had failed, and didn't get invited back the next year. So just to be real clear, in all caps, Bluetooth is not Wi-Fi. It is in the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum though, so it runs in the same spectrum as AO211B and G. It's a personal area networking technology. A couple other odds and ends of this slide. Pairing. Pairing is when you set up a trust relationship between two devices. You should only have to do it once between two devices. If you repair every time you connect to the device, you're doing it wrong. Just FYI. The keys that are exchanged during the pairing process are persistent across all these different connections. We'll get into attack against pairing here in a bit, but I just want everybody to at least understand this is a one-time thing between two devices. RFCOMM, for all intents and purposes, this is serial port emulation, pure and simple. It's, you know, the same RTS, CTS, all that crap, all gets virtually emulated and sent across the wireless media. Ignoring, of course, the fact that we have all this media control stuff in Bluetooth, we have to then emulate it higher up just to make it more complicated. It was funny because I hadn't read a serial port, you know, guide and protocol spec in years until I started doing some Bluetooth work about 6 months ago on a particular device that was using some weird part of RFCOM, and I was like rereading all the RS-232 docs I had, and I scrubbed myself really good at the end of it. Apparently y'all haven't done enough serial work. Bluetooth crash course. AT commands, they're actually used. Hey, wow, there's a Wayback Machine. You remember the sound of a modem, you know, training against another modem, and you walk by and you think kind of nostalgically about that? Well, wait till you type in AT commands by hand into a shell again. Okay, you feel like it's 1995. It's actually used to control a lot of things that happen across that serial port connection. AT commands are used to talk to your earbuds, your Bluetooth earbuds. They actually send AT commands back and forth, talk to your phone, all this kind of crap. Swear to God, Hayes AT commands. You can go read them up, list them out. Discoverable mode. So here's my immense amount of OmniGraffle foo for those Mac users. It's like Vizio, but better. The idea here is you've got a device that wants to find another Bluetooth device, figure out what services are running on it. Okay, this is effectively like, you know, doing a, let's say, Wi-Fi, you know, war driving. I'm finding a device, and I'm going to run a port scan. Same type of thing that occurs here. In order to make this happen, basically the source device sends an inquiry, get an inquiry response back from a discoverable device. The bottom, you see the non-discoverable device just shuts up. Doesn't say anything. Doesn't respond with, I'm not here. It just doesn't say anything. Then a page is basically a request to build a connection, get a page response. The page is done by MAC address, okay? For a device to be found, you have to do one of two things, or one of several things. One, you can do an inquiry request. You can do this, hey, let's look for a discoverable device, and get the answer. That's the way normal humans would do it. As an attacker, you can do something that was, I think, first put forth by the guys at Stake, which was try every MAC address. We'll get into why that's a bad idea in a bit, but you can just start guessing MAC addresses and making these page requests, and eventually, if you get the right one, the device with the right MAC address will respond. MAC addresses are really short, right? That shouldn't take too long. And then the final thing is the service discovery, so you send a service discovery SDP, send that request out, you get a response back, it says, here's all the things that I am, let me tell you all about myself. Blonde hair, blue eyes, I do file transfer protocol, and I like walks in the rain. There you go. Or, if you're really well-funded, you go get yourself a Spectrum analyzer or a high-end Bluetooth protocol analyzer, and you just look for any traffic going on, and you figure this out all on your own. So, what's the state of the union? Just real quick, core spec is now 2.0, not relevant, it's just a random number. What's neat though is that there's enhanced data rate, we can now do 3 megabits a second. Still not burning fast, but it ain't bad. Security is largely still the same it's been for a long time. As of November last year, 9.5 million Bluetooth radios are being shipped each week. 9.5 billion. That's one radio for every person each year on the planet. That's a lot of freaking radios. That number's just going up. It was up from 4.7 million 4 months prior. Holy crap. That data is 9 months old. We're easily shipping 12 or 13 million radios every week right now. Wow. Potentially huge vulnerabilities. Why aren't we poking at them? We'll find out in a minute. Makes Wi-Fi look pretty wimpy from a market penetration. Great thing about determining market penetration is if you can figure it out, you can charge a lot of money for it. I tried to find out how many Wi-Fi radios were shipped, and I got to some market research site, and it was like, for $5,000, we'll give you our 25-page report. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I read all their press releases, and it was kind of this composability issue where I could kind of guesstimate that there might be 200 million Wi-Fi chips shipped per year. So that's about 40% of the Bluetooth penetration on an annual basis. So Bluetooth is running roughshod. So just in case you read another Slashdot article on Bluetooth dying, give them the middle finger for me. Profiles govern how multiple devices talk to each other. Profiles are basically, you can just say, this is how keyboards talk to each other, this is how mice talk to each other, this is how file transfer occurs, okay? So it prevents everybody from having to reinvent the wheel every time. The problem was anyone could write a profile. And because of that, it got very confusing. Some of you have heard me tell the story where I bought a headset profile thing for my ear, and my phone only supported the hands-free profile, and so while they could pair, they couldn't actually exchange audio data. Like as a consumer, that didn't make any difference to me. Like I didn't give a crap. Like one thing went in my ear and made sound, and the other thing connected to the telecommunications network. And as far as I was concerned, if they could talk Bluetooth, they should do the right thing. Well, they didn't. So to clear it all up, they made icons. Wonderful icons. Anyone know what the arrows are for? File transfer. Very good. It took me a while actually, maybe because I'm slow. And I think the first thing is actually a printer, but I'm not entirely sure of that. But anyway, we've now, if you see the printer thing on a printer, that'd be a dead giveaway. If you see it on something else, we might need to rethink what it is. So anyway, these are the profiles. They now officially have these things. You can download them from the Bluetooth.com or org website. Yeehaw. Common deployment scenarios. What's kind of interesting about Bluetooth is everyone thought Bluetooth would be another disruptive technology like Wi-Fi. Everyone thinks WiMAX is going to be another disruptive technology like Wi-Fi. Let's talk about some definitions of terms. If you call something a disruptive technology before it's actually been introduced in the market, it's not officially disruptive technology because you already see it coming, okay? It's not a surprise, it's not a disruption according to the definition of the word, okay? Wi-Fi was the first cheap wireless stuff that you could go buy as a consumer and do random things with. So people tried to do like Wi-Fi enabled headsets because they could, because it was cheap and they could buy the gear and integrate it. People did successfully build Wi-Fi metropolitan area networks through brute force and the will of God. They've been able to convince these local area network radios to go, what was the shot at DEF CON last year, 100 and some odd miles? You know, they had a shot between a U-Haul in Utah and a U-Haul down here in Nevada for 100 and some odd miles. People are building metro networks in Portland and Seattle and New York City based on a LAN protocol, right? Wi-Fi went everywhere it wasn't supposed to. Like that was the beauty of it. It was disruptive. Well, now all the investors are trying to find the next cool disruptive thing to invest in. So WiMAX is going to be disruptive. No, if anything, WiMAX is just going to put Wi-Fi back in its place. It's like, stop playing in the metro space. We got it here now, fellas. We really know what we're doing. Bluetooth, it's funny, I played around with a Bluetooth network access device, basically a hotspot for Bluetooth stuff. Tried to stream some video over it. It was all kind of robot-y, except they weren't actually trying to dance. It was really bad video because the data rate was so low, the packet loss is so high. We had two Wi-Fi networks in the room that were just stomping all over the thing. Didn't work, Bluetooth had this handy little thing that's not really high-powered usually, and it's not really high bandwidth. So it's managed to stay in the little niche that they designed it for, which is personal area networking. Printers, because I don't understand this. God's honest truth, has anyone ever printed anything via Bluetooth? Okay, 2 people. How many people own printers or have printers at work that are Bluetooth enabled? Okay, probably 3 or 4. That was not nearly as informative a survey as I'd hoped it would have been. I don't think that that's a common use case for me. Like, I don't think walking up to a printer and trying to figure out how to print to it via Bluetooth is any easier than just printing to it over the network or connecting up to the damn thing. But yet, they're putting radios in it, so it must be useful. So, wow, that really was not nearly as informative. All right, so moving right along off of that slide, a little bomb, I'll sweep that under the rug. By the way, if you want to write about something in the press, I don't actually have shoes on today. I tend to take them off. That's better than quoting me as saying, God damn it. Toby, you have a question? On what computing? No. What? Oh, no. Okay, no. First, so the questions were, well, they're from Toby, so they're a little silly. The first was, it's going to beat me up after this. The first was, am I familiar with Bluetooth being used for anything mesh related? No, and I think the follow-on is this dust computing and like things that self-form and kind of sensor net kind of idea. Is that what you're talking about? Little itty bitty. He's 50 feet away from me and he's going like this. I mean, part of the problem is architecturally, you got these things that are limited to 7 connections, which might be good or might be bad depending on how you're building this ad hoc network. The great things are they're low power. People were trying to do these self-forming Wi-Fi networks for a long time, but the power consumptions tend to be kind of high because the radios weren't really designed to handle the ultra-low power situations that Bluetooth was designed to handle. The Bluetooth protocol, one of the reasons it's so complicated is it's designed to handle all these low power situations. And so using it for some kind of random mesh thing or sensor net thing probably is quite possible. Frankly, I haven't kept up on it. I think the whole mesh network and sensor network thing is best left to the academics right now because of practical applications asymptotically approach zero for non-military personnel. You know, if you're in the military, it's great. If you're not in the military, like, oh, I need to set up a network in my house. I'm going to take this handful of crap and throw it into the living room. The dog peed on one of them, but I still got 5 more. You know, I'm not sure why Best Buy would want to buy into that market. And as Toby pointed out, feel free to ask questions in the middle of my talk. Thank you, Toby. This is a random slide. So, you know, Sun Tzu had to be quoted at some point. It was either Sun Tzu or Steve Bellevin, and I went for Sun Tzu this time. We have to understand the threats, and this is kind of important. This is a non-subtle thing. The last 3 talks I've given in Vegas have been, I think, kind of controversial from a, you know, not really in the mainline way of thinking. Like last year, I gave a whole why you never want to use Linux and you should use Windows thing at DEF CON. Yeah, thank you. I assume you're applauding because I lived, not because you agree with it. And then yesterday I gave a talk on why trusted computing is a good thing. And today I'm here to tell you that wireless security isn't nearly as bad as you think it is. And it's something that we really need to struggle to understand. We need to figure out what the hell the threat model is for Bluetooth. You know, why do we care? And we need to first understand why, you know, why people are attacking it, how the attacks work, and then we can figure out how to defend against it. You know, if there's a lot of potential for attack, there's a huge attack potential, as Microsoft would say, a big attack surface, then we need to worry about it. If there's not a big attack surface, let's all go somewhere else. I'll buy the first round because we shouldn't be worrying about these things. Tryfornet.org, Major Malfunction and crew have been leading the, you know, the charge of attacks for the last few years. I'm not saying other people haven't been doing research, but Tryfornet.org is really the big boys in the block. Major was here last year, you know, automatically dialing people's cell phones, and he's very theatrical about it, so I'm going to let him do demos of his attack tools. I didn't write any of them, whatever. You know, we've done some device discovery work as well as AtStake has, and we did some tracking stuff. There are other people, there are academics that have looked into this. There's not a huge body of knowledge out there. I mean, God's honest truth. It's not something that's bubbled up to the concern of an enterprise level. So all you have are a few little random tools released by some vendors. You don't have great guidance. You don't have policies in the networks yet. And it's not really clear, you know, if a device, you know, if it's my cell phone, what's the impact of a Bluetooth-enabled cell phone in the enterprise? If I sync it up to the enterprise, what's the impact? People don't really know. Most of what's been really damaging, as I've said, has been poor implementation. And this has been led by probably 3 major factors. One, rush to market, okay? Bluetooth, if I'm a developer in a program where the expectation is set that what you're developing is going to be disruptive and really cool and everyone's going to want it, and I'm staring at a design spec, I'm a little nervous. You know, that's a high expectation. That's performance anxiety. More than 40% of men over age 40 have performance anxiety. So the rush to market, this need to get something out there and be the best, was, you know, Bluetooth was very buzzword compliant for a while. So that led to a bunch of crap being thrown against the wall. Not much of it stuck. Thank you, I appreciate that. Cookie Monster will come up here later. We'll talk about how to spell and pronounce things. Super complicated and sometimes not really all that clear protocol stacks lead to poor security. And frankly, not to beat this drum, every time I get on stage, I gotta say it, we don't train developers, okay? As much as I like to rail on developers, there's a lack of training out there for them. You know, they come out of college, and if they know how to do crypto, we're doing good. If they know how to prevent race conditions in their code, wow, they're doing fantastic. We're entering a really weird time for developers because they're really up against the wall. Systems are becoming way more complicated than they ever have been. They're still not trained how to write secure code, and now we even have new low-level issues creeping back into the problem. Like, we had just started to tackle thread safety and things like that, and now we have dual-core CPUs and quad-core CPUs. Holy crap. I'm running this MacBook here, and it's a dual-core box. You know, let's get thread safe on multi-core systems. We have multiple processors we need to be worried about again. Writing secure, thread safe stuff is going to be kind of hard. You know, developers, honest to God, they're in a really tough spot right now. And as much as some folks want to disparage the state, you know, the developers say you're all dumb and idiots and whatever, honestly, the cards are stacked against them. So I encourage you, when we're done, go find a developer, give them a big hug, tell them it's okay, we sympathize with you. They won't have a clue what you're saying, but karma, you know, eventually will come around. Either someone's scanning me or calling me, I'm not sure which, but the scanning thing, hey, oh, I might have just inadvertently had my phone owned. I think my phone's discoverable, as it turns out. Somebody with a BlackBerry up front's having fun. Anyway, Blue Diving, for those who have a Linux-based system, it's a utility that basically ties together a bunch of the Trifinet attack tools and allows you to run them on a Linux system so you don't have to run them from a cell phone. The guy was a little worried about basically creating munitions, so he purposely broke everything, and you have to kind of fix it. It's a bit of a Inspector Gadget situation of stumbling through intentionally broken code to figure out how to make it all work, including a really interesting off-by-one error that you have to track down in order to make the scripts work properly. So you can download the code and try to run it, or maybe if it's GPL, just re-release it yourself. So the real risk, it's not that big of a deal, right? At least to the general public, it's not that big of a deal. Where's the big thing that's happened, the big scary thing that's happened to the enterprise, the national security because of wireless security? Paris Hilton's sidekick got owned, and that was a huge deal. I'm gonna just chuck this thing out the window. Paris Hilton's sidekick got owned, and they started selling more sidekicks. It was, there's no such thing as bad publicity, right? Poof, there you go. So nobody really cares about wireless security. I mean, they care enough to know, like, Wi-Fi was in the news, and people say, oh, I should have a key and whatever. But the truth of the matter is, any hotspot we go into these days, anybody in this room could own. You could take all the computers down to that hotspot, you could pop them. The tools are out there, it's not rocket science. But who's doing it? What do they stand to gain? It's a localized attack. If I care about owning one person, if I say, sir, in the red shirt, I'm gonna steal your credit, because for some reason I believe you to have really good credit and I want it, and plus you're the head of a multinational organization, so I'm going after you. That capability exists with Wi-Fi, with Bluetooth. That's fun and interesting. If I say, I'm gonna own everybody in this room and steal all your credit, I'm gonna do it wirelessly, you're all gonna flick me off at the same time. This is not the way it works. There's not grandiose attacks that are enabled. They're usually localized, specific attacks. You have to have a reason to want to carry them out. If there's someone trying to commit identity theft by popping people's boxes at Starbucks, they're one of the dumbest identity thieves in the world. Go stand outside the Veterans Administration building, knock someone over the head, and steal the laptop, okay? So, does that excuse us from dealing with the problem? No, okay? Just because it's not a problem today doesn't mean we shouldn't think about security, okay? We still need to do it. Is Bluetooth security still an issue for those worried about targeted attacks? Yes, okay? If you control a high-end enterprise, multi-billion-dollar market cap, or you're, three-letter agency somewhere or whatever, yeah, you still got to be worried about these things. Should we temper our response to ensure we stay within the bounds of reality? Absolutely. Okay? This is one of the hardest things for people to learn. Pardon the fifth soapbox that I managed to find up here, but it's really important as security professionals that we keep in mind what it is we're trying to accomplish and what it is we're supporting. I used to help run an enterprise, and we had really good security guys, God bless them, but they had the hardest time understanding where the limit between secure enough and ridiculously secure was. If the organization has a business need to deploy a product, you don't need to make it the best possible product in the world so that any academic in the room or the place couldn't come and attack it. No, you just have to make it good enough that any potential losses are still within bounds for the company to accept, right? Security isn't absolute. We all know that. Duh. Security in your enterprise also is not absolute. Accept it. Okay? Security with any other particular technology like Bluetooth, not absolute. Let's accept it and move on. So, why is there so little interest in Bluetooth security? Rob Limos asked me this last night, and I kind of stumbled through an answer which I've now tried to capture in PowerPoint form because it makes more sense when you can put it in bullet points. Honestly, I don't think we've solved the discovery problem yet, okay? If you look at what happened at DEF CON 9, Pete Shipley got on stage, God bless Pete Shipley. How many people saw the DC-9 war driving talk? Oh, wow, that's a very small number of hands. So Pete Shipley, anyone have a word to describe this man? Unique, was that what I heard? Yes, let's go with unique individual. He, kilt-wearing raver from San Francisco, gets up on stage and talks about war driving. He's written some scripts, he's built some stuff, he's up on top of this building looking like an animal, aiming this antenna down on San Francisco and showing, here's where all these access points are in San Francisco. And like, people loved and hate Pete, and they're throwing stuff at him and whatever, but God bless it, that wasn't a big tipping point in what we did with Wi-Fi security. Because he got up there and he told a whole bunch of people, here's how to do it. You go buy this gear, you use this software, you write some scripts, bam, you can find all this stuff. Well, you know, where I work, we have a 4-box description of penetration testing. You know, and the first one is planning, the second one is discovery, and the third is go off and break the thing, and the fourth is reporting. There's feedback loops in there, right? Not rocket science. If you can't get past the second box of discovery, you can't attack it, okay? Simple. This is basic logic, 4 steps, right? Pete helped us get past step 2, you know? He got us onto step 3. So geeks with disposable income could then take $300 and go buy some stuff and find devices and then figure out ways to break them. All right? So that's pretty cool and all. $300, a lot of geeks have $300 of disposable income. Not millions of them, but enough to make a difference. Now we could do, you know, WarDrive for free. You buy a laptop, it's got integrated Wi-Fi, you open it up, download some code, hit a button, and it works. Well, we haven't hit that point with Bluetooth yet. We haven't gotten past step 2. We can't discover the devices that don't want to be found. All we can do is find the devices that want to be found. And while that's interesting and fun, there's not the same voyeuristic appeal that we had with Wi-Fi. You don't feel like you're spying on your neighbors. You just feel like, you know, I'm spying on people that want to be spied on. It's no fun if I know you're watching. So 10K is a lot of disposable money to kick around. And I'm not saying some geeks don't have $10,000 of disposable income. Not many do. And without finding a device, you can't attack it. Ergo, it's not sexy, and if it's not sexy, the open source altruistic community doesn't go looking for it very often. Next. Here's a breakdown of the current attacks and vulnerabilities. Let's see. Poor defaults. You're going to see more and more slides later, so you don't have to get too jittery about writing these down. There's link level vulnerabilities, location tracking, human interface issues, poor implementation. These are really, I think, the high level breakdowns of what we see today in the field, where the tools are geared toward, where the research is going on. Note, there's only really one thing here that's dealing with actually looking for vulnerabilities in the core protocol. The rest are other things, touchy-feely things, implementation problems, etc. So, stupid defaults. Let's talk about the first class of problem. Hard configured pins. There are devices out there that promiscuously just want to pair with things, and they have pins that you can't change. Trifinet.org's Car Whisperer program, which got Audi to force Trifinet to change their logo because I thought they were mocking Audi, because they were showing how they were owning an Audi from distance with an antenna. Pretty funny. Basically, they could try to connect to it. The car had a hard set pin, like 1, 2, 3, 4 or some nonsense, promiscuously looking for things to pair with. It would pair, and then you could just talk to people in the car as they were driving by down the road. It's a little disconcerting for the people in the car. This is God. You've been touching yourself again. All right. So enough people have seen Real Science or Real Genius. I'm sorry. I always get Weird Science and Real Genius confused. I'm very disappointed when I go watch Weird Science and I meant to watch Real Genius. So again, the pin's only used at pairing time though. So if we have pins you can't guess and you don't have things that promiscuously want to pair with things, you do a lot better. Some things don't have any authentication on purpose, some on accident. No authentication on purpose is the poor default arena. Like automatically accepting V-cards, some things will just basically suck up V-cards. They assume, oh, only legitimate people who send well-structured V-cards would send V-cards to me. Deer in the headlight, gets run over by the truck. You know, it's a little sketchy to have that, you know. There's very few pieces of electronic data I want sent to any device unauthenticated. You know, period. Like, it's not cool, man. Like, JPEGs can own your system, so why would I, like, accept complex structured data like a V-card? Give me a break. Profiles get turned on by default. This is not rocket science. This is like running extra services. If you don't need it, don't run it. Well, it's a problem if you don't have the ability to turn it off, okay? We're going to do a quick little demo here, in theory. In theory, communism works. Simpsons fans in the room? 1. All right, good. This is iStumbler, a Bluetooth war driving thingamabob for Macs, which apparently is not finding anything at the moment. That's not good. Ooh. So, all right, what I'm going to do is browse the previous device. So this is my cell phone here. It's a nice Apple. Somebody was scanning me while I was in a bar in England a few months ago, and they had an Apple. So I changed the name of my phone to Nice Apple, and the guy stopped scanning me. The only reason I could tell is because I was looking at my phone at the time and I saw the little blinky lights going back and forth. Now that's a user interface decision, right? To say, hey, you're being scanned repetitively, blink, 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 doesn't even vibrate, right? This is all the things my phone advertises by default, okay? Now, whether or not you need authentication to get to them, that's a whole different animal. But these are the things on, this is a Sony Ericsson W600, I think, phone. It's got the little flippy bit, woo, flippy bit. And by default, it has dial-up networking, serial port, voice gateway, OBEX stuffs, a NAP service, and oh, it's a mouse and a keyboard. No, seriously, it's a mouse and a keyboard. I can use this to control PowerPoint presentations, move the mouse around on my screen, type stuff out in T9. Try typing an SSH session in T9 sometime. A lot of fun, a lot of fun. There's no way for me to turn that off. You know, that's just the way the thing is. That's not cool. So, real quick, I want to see if I can restart this thing and actually get it to scan, because it will be fairly amusing if I could find the people that are scanning me. And then, oh, and for the non-Mac users, whoo, look, oh, my desktop got all mangled. That wasn't nearly as pretty. We could still do the little sound effect, woo, woo. Woo, there it was. Hi there, guy. Desktop. Name, date modified. No. You can see everything. Porn. iStumbler 2. There. Bluetooth. Oops. Hack. Add to contacts? No. Someone just tried to send me something. All right, it's really pissed off. Man, and I was really hoping to make a point with this. What I want to do is scan everybody. Oh, there we go, phone. Let's put my Mac up here. Don't throw anything at me. Here's a phone. Let's see whose phone this is. We'll browse it. Didn't come up. This is the greatest demo ever. Ever. You are owned. That was another one during a Bluetooth talk I was giving. Somebody changed their thing to you are owned. Wow. All right, how many people, okay, let's just step back a second. Phone, oh, that's me. How many people in the first 4 or 5 rows here have a Bluetooth-enabled device? How many people have their phone in discoverable mode, their device in discoverable mode? 2, 3, 4. For a few seconds, right. Just for me, aw. Someone's actually managed to change the MAC address to 2222222. Good job. Hey, bonus points for that, guys. I'm waiting for the dead beef one to show up. So, I mean, the moral of the story is here, we've got 6 devices show up in discoverable mode. You know, I'm probably hitting a 30 or 40 foot radius here. And we had 20 or 30 devices not in discoverable mode. If I'm an attacker, I can only go after these 6 or 7 devices. I can't go after everything else. Okay, not rocket science, okay? That's as good as it gets without me laying down $10,000 to try to do something more advanced, okay? That's as good as it gets. I encourage you, if you take one takeaway out of this thing, takeaway, that's a consulting term, you should go tell your friends when they ask about Bluetooth security, say, set your device in non-discoverable mode, good enough. Unless your name is George W. Bush, nothing to worry about. Well, except I'm not going to make political statements in front of the audience. That would be bad. More stupid defaults. Each profile is like an application. Each application itself can have bad defaults. Duh. I had a Belkin CF adapter that had file sharing turned on by default, world writable by default, and the root of the thing by default was the root to the file system. By default. I haven't said by default enough. That's ridiculous. I don't care what the developer is, who it is. That is unacceptable. But again, every application run on every device, all those things that were shared out of this phone could have something bad in them. Every single one of them. However, on the flip side, it's only a handful of phones. Sony only made so many of these. And I don't know how many people saw FX's talk yesterday on the BlackBerry stuff. FX made the point, just in the BlackBerry lineage alone, like every device is different, Some devices have the BlackBerry proprietary OS. Some devices have a third-party operating system. Some of them have different protocol stacks. Some of them have different applications. Some of them have Java. Some of them don't. holy cow, that's just RIM stuff, and they run a good shop, you know? And you talk about Nokias, and you talk about Sonys, and you talk about Apples and Windows and all this crap. There's so much variance. You know, this is the whole Mike Lynn thing from last year when Mike makes a statement of, hey, the reason I'm releasing the Cisco stuff right now is because up until this point, if you wanted to write a worm for routers, you had to write a specific worm for every damn router. And then you had to build this giant list of payloads that went trouncing around with your exploit. And so as you know, the router with 16 megs of memory gets owned, and then the half a gig of exploit material comes in behind it to propagate. You know, the router will explode. I worked at an ISP, and we were upgrading equipment. It was in Alaska. And we were in Anchorage, and we were doing a system upgrade for some routers that are actually terminal servers up in Fairbanks. Note, 360 miles of nothing between point A and point B. Don't want to have to go there unless you have to in February. And one of the guys inadvertently we changed the routing protocol so that instead of getting just a handful of routes from the enterprise, the thing suddenly got like every route on the internet. And this little term server with like 4 megs of memory was actually physically damaged. It wouldn't boot anymore. Like it wouldn't even turn on. Like the route table ran through NVRAM, ran through all the EEPROM, and like went to the power supply. Boof! Internet blew up my term server. It was fantastic. God, I'm not even sure where the hell I was going with that. It's a good story though. I mean, you gotta help me. What? It was a what? A ruse? A moose, yes, a moose stomped on top of it. Also note, don't screw with mooses. If you're a GI and you get stationed up in Alaska, one of the first things they show you is like a don't screw with moose video, and it's like, you know, moose stomping on GIs. Like, you know, here's a GI that tried to put a bumper sticker of the local radio station on the ass end of this moose. Stomp, 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 stomp. Poor little guy from South Carolina comes out like a pancake. Yeah, so don't screw with mooses. Don't put all the internet's routing table into a Livingston Portmaster. So discoverable by default, blah, blah. You know, we've been down there. Oh, discoverable mode also sucks down battery faster. So if you're battery conscious, you can leave it off too. That's a great non-security thing. People think that you're paranoid because you're a security person. So no, I care about the environment. It's the environment, okay? You know, it's really expensive to drive cars these days, so make sure you set your phone in non-discoverable mode and let them think about that for a minute as you walk away. So here's a notional breakdown of how good it is to keep discoverable mode off. In discoverable mode, it takes less than 10.24 seconds. Note, I didn't make that up. That is the actual specified time because of very technical reasons how the inquiry scan and the frequency hopping happens in Bluetooth. You have to give it at least 10.24 seconds to find discoverable devices. The cost, as we saw, was free. I have a laptop, already has Bluetooth integrated, download a piece of software, boom, I find it. Brute force with MAC guessing. Let's assume one prefix. I know the first 6 hex digits of the thing that I'm trying to attack, so I only have to guess the second 6, 1.6 million addresses. At 10.24 seconds, that's a long time, okay? That's 6 years. If you can get a person to stand still for 6 years while you try to attack their device, good job. Good job. You are the best social engineer ever. If we do something like at-stakes Red Fang, where they serialize 8 devices, up to X, but where realistically X is 8. You put 8 radios together on this thing, and you say, hey, I'm going to segregate that 1.6 million search string into 200,000 addresses. I'm still talking nearly a year. Even if I'm good, and I have a reasonable idea, let's say I'm only going to dole out 20,000 addresses per radio because I've got a database and I've profiled all these vendors' things. We're still talking 24 days, 2-3 weeks. Give me a break. Come on. I mean, as much as this is academically interesting to talk about brute force discovery and all the tools have it in there because it's cute and fun, it's not realistic. Anyone found a device by brute force using any of these tools? How many people have run a Bluetooth war driving tool, first of all? Let's start there. Number of people. How many people tried the brute force thing? Couple. Wow, congratulations. Didn't find anything, did you? No, right. Nothing. You're not going to. I mean, fact of the matter is, it's cute and it's neat. It's useless. No offense to, I did not mean that in an offensive way, especially the at-stake guys, because, brother, they were pushing the envelope on this really early on. Everyone's running down a particular path looking for something. It's just, this path wasn't the way to go. Using a protocol analyzer, and if you have a known MAC address of the master, you can find a non-discoverable Bluetooth device in about 5 seconds, costs $10,000. If you know nothing about it, it gets complicated, because you can do crazy things like hook up a spectrum analyzer, pull all the RF out, suck it out, push down all the waveforms onto a hard drive, run Fourier transforms on them, and look for ones and zeros, and then recompose the protocol yourself, and then try to find the MAC address. That sound was the money being sucked out of my wallet while I paid for that activity. Okay, that is not cheap. What needs to happen with discovery is people, and people are working on this right now, taking a software-defined radio, writing a Bluetooth implementation that runs on top of something like New Radio that's wideband, allows us to sniff, and allows us to have better visibility into what's going on. Until that happens, this chart ain't going to change much. Okay, the 10K may come down to 5K or something, but for all intents and purposes, you're not going to go buy a spectrum analyzer for $300. Not a good one. Unless, who's the guy? Who's who's the guy at DEF CON that always sells all the crazy gear? Uncle Ira, yeah, Uncle Ira. Uncle Ira would come to DEF CON and sell like the craziest stuff, man. Protocol analyzers and RF jammers and things that must have been illegal in 100 countries and great stuff, man. And Uncle Ira, yeah, good things. Link level attacks. Here's this paper where basically they fake their Bluetooth address. Again, congrats to the guy who was all twos because he figured out how to fake your Bluetooth address. And they tried to make basically a secured connection to a device that already had a secure connection to that MAC address. So I've got two devices that have an existing trust relationship. I spoof a MAC address from the third device and try to make a connection. After 3 or 4 times of doing it, the device you're trying to connect to says, oh, hey, you must have forgotten your key. And then some devices, the next thing they say is, do you want to repair? I got it going on, and they'll just promiscuously try to repair. And so at that point, you can just go ahead and attempt to repair. If the device has a default PIN, or the person uses something dumb like 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, you can get yourself a paired connection. Now you have basically a secure connection to a device that you don't control, or you don't own, and you can go try to own. Kind of neat trick. This is actually under the guise of what they were doing was the main point of the paper is they were doing PIN attacks where they would sniff the PIN transactions and then brute force guess the PIN. Okay, just some quick math. It's what, 2006? We have 4 gigahertz computers these days. The pins that we're using are 4 digits long, okay? 4 gigahertz of processing power versus a 10,000 key search space. These guys in their paper optimized what they did from, I think it was like 5 milliseconds to 2 milliseconds. So that was like, wow. I guess as the key space gets bigger, if you do use a bigger pin and your devices support it, their technique obviously has some gains. But for the vast majority of the population that uses 4-digit pins, it wasn't that big of a deal. I think what was way more interesting about this paper was this attack. Clear text data, again, people do send clear text data. This is a link level attack. If you don't encrypt stuff, you can smell it and you can get it. Location tracking. So it's RF. Not shocking, you can do this, you can track people. 2 years ago, we tracked people all over Black Hat. It was kind of fun. We had sensors set up in people's laptops, and we had probably 60 discoverable devices that year. 60 out of a population of probably 4,000 people. I assure you there are more than 60 devices, Bluetooth-enabled devices there. I would guess there are probably 600 Bluetooth-enabled devices there. So, again, turn discoverable mode off. I can't say that enough. If you haven't done it yet, if you're idly listening to me and you're getting bored because you're thinking this guy's on slide 20, he hasn't said anything interesting, please just take your phone and turn discoverable mode off. Let's just reiterate this, like, hallelujah. For some, tracking is a plus. If you go to this zoo in the Netherlands, I think it is, or somewhere up in the cold regions. They use blue tags to track kids. Legoland has the same thing, where basically you put this tracking dart in your kid's butt, and then you can use your cell phone via SMS and say, "Where's Johnny?" And Johnny, runs, "Ow!" His butt lights up, and then they tell him where Johnny is. So, I mean, it's a long-range RFID, right? It was cheap. So this is maybe one area where Bluetooth wasn't really intended to go into tracking, but it's probably more robust and got more security than RFID does, so people are using it for that. So, finally, on the attack front, human interface issues, there's not, as I said, there's not a lot of control and configuration options on some devices. My MacBook here has a few, like, here I can do file transfers, file exchange, PDA sync, serial port, and they're all off. I can turn them on. I have fine-grained control. I'll be honest, I didn't even look at a Windows box to see if you could do this. Last time I looked at a Windows box with Bluetooth was about 6 months ago, and you couldn't. There may be some fine-grained stuff, but laptops are only one type of thing. My phone is another, and it'd be great to be able to control what I can do. Rogue devices. A name is not an authentication credential. Don't trust a device just because it's a friendly name of something you know. If you're going to pair to a device and it's next to you, it's your BlackBerry, 4720, or I don't know BlackBerries. It's a BlackBerry. I was doing work in a BlackBerry lab one day, and I tried to pair with a BlackBerry, and 17 BlackBerries responded all with the same name. Like, hey, how do you find the MAC address of that thing? We all kind of looked at it, oh God, scrolling through config menus and stuff. It wasn't easy. It wasn't actually easy to figure out what the MAC address of the BlackBerry was to pair to it, let alone to figure out, BlackBerry is a pretty robust device. Take a simple little cell phone and try to find the MAC address of that thing. David, are you owning my phone? Okay, good. Yeah. What other ways are there though? As a consumer, if I'm trying to pair or I'm trying to connect to a device, if it's not for that simple name, I have to do it by MAC address. Well, MAC address isn't infallible either. What other mechanisms are there? There aren't any, right? There's nothing exposed to me as a user. There's no tools, there's no cryptographic algorithms. That initial connection is very dangerous. You don't know who you're talking to. Until you have the keys established, until it's paired, you have no earthly clue what the device on the other end is. So the ultimate thing is, go get Gene Hackman's Faraday cage before it blew up out of Enemy of the State, crawl inside of it, pair your devices, and then come out and blow it up in some big explosion. It'll be great. Social engineering, change your name of your phone to pin 1234. Send it to someone as a pairing request. So they'll say, pin 1234 wants to pair with you. Do you want to pair? A lot of people who aren't security conscious might hit yes. And then they'll say, pin, oh, pin's 1234. 1234, boop, there, you got a paired connection. So, sir.
Kevin said a scan camp was something recently where he said his Bluetooth device needs to carriage turn. Do you want free porn? Carriage turn. And do you want to pair with, and then the device name just scroll right up the screen on all the Motorola devices.
Nice.
Blue line.
Nice. So the idea here is you put a lot of carriage returns after your device name. You make your device name a question, like, do you want free porn? People hit yes, and you can go pair with the thing. You do malicious stuff that way. When I was overseas, there were people looking for discoverable devices in like billboards and trying to send me files. Do you want Virgin Atlantic.mp4? Like, no, just because I happen to be next to a Virgin Atlantic sign that's sending me this, I don't know who this is. Like, if I'm in the subway and I'm bored, I'm like waiting for, a subway, a tube in London, like I'm just gonna fire up my laptop and send malicious MP4s to people full of porn or whatever, standing next to the Virgin Atlantic sign. Like, they're gonna sue Virgin Atlantic over this. Wow, my laptop is very upset. There we go. Bad implementation. We've talked about this a fair bit. Exposing functionality prior to authentication. This is the basis for BlueSnarf. And then we've got packet of deaths. Yes, BlueSmack is a tool, again, from Trifinet. Sends a big L2 ping packet over a device to try to kill it. Shocker. There's protocol problems. You can fuzz Bluetooth protocols and have a lot of success. Surprise, I know it's a shock. So let's talk about some defense techniques. I think I've got 15 minutes to go, so we need to figure out how to defend Bluetooth. Thankfully, since I hadn't figured it out yet, I spent all the time on attack during this conversation. Enterprise tools are largely geared toward the infrastructure. This is, as an enterprise, is what we were concerned about, protecting the infrastructure. This is why Wi-Fi clients got screwed for so long, is because we were so worried about keeping the infrastructure secure. We forgot, there's these things connecting to them called clients, so we need to worry about that. In Bluetooth, it's even worse because most of these devices aren't corporately controlled. Again, what's the risk of this device to your enterprise? Something you need to figure out for yourself. Bluetooth is more prevalent. Deployment scenarios are far more varied. Users need to find a way to protect themselves. At the end of the day, you can't educate users, but you got to make it easy for them to do it if they want. And today, even if they want to protect themselves, they can't. So it turns out that security products need to be usable. I think I've probably mentioned this enough times. Go read yourself Why Johnny Can Encrypt. It's a paper from a few years ago explaining why PGP at the time was really useless, not because of the crypto, but because nobody could use it. In complicated emerging technologies, only users can recognize attacks. It turns out that with rogue access point detection, a lot of it's heuristic decision making. Because there's not a lot of mechanisms within the core protocol to make the decision as to, is this access point okay or not, until you actually try to authenticate with it. And unless you're using the best authentication possible, you still may not know the answer to that. So the users kind of have to get involved and say, is this really a bad situation? Like the MAC address of the access point just changed, is that okay? I just had a huge spike in signal strength, is that okay? And the users want to be able to tune that. smart users. Dumb users, you just want to make the decision and then put up with the help desk calls. So in Bluetooth, it's the same thing. You know, right now we're not at a state where we can deterministically say, this is all the bad stuff that can happen, and this is all the good stuff, and here's the thick line in between them. You know, there's going to be gray areas in between. For the product vendors in the room, this is an opportunity for you. Products rushed to market don't have the best security, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and so to the point on the last bullet point, it's not rocket science, though, to make these decisions. The capability, as I said, is not available to the user, and as we found out, it's not available to the developer. You know, Apple, for the longest time, their Bluetooth API consisted of call the wizard. If you wanted to find a Bluetooth device on a you know, OS 10, you basically called the OS 10 find device wizard, the thing that popped up on that other thing when I clicked browse, and then you waited for it to return you the information on the device. You couldn't intermediate, you couldn't do anything else, you just called this wizard, you waited for the wizard to do its thing, and then pop, out came the device. Well, if you're trying to write Bluetooth security capabilities, that's not really all that useful to you because you didn't get a chance to see the entire environment that you were in. Defense mechanism, user notification authorization. Users should be notified when all connections try to happen. Again, this is not exposed as a developer thing. We're going to have to hook things via inter-process communication in the drivers in order to catch when somebody does a discovery scan. You know, there's not some little alert or trap I can get out of it natively. I have to go off and do what effectively boils down to reverse engineering of what's going on. I should know. I shouldn't have to look for the little blinky Bluetooth light. Again, I can sit in a bar all day just like I was and be scanned and not know it. Users should have the ability to whitelist MAC addresses or blacklist MAC addresses. I really don't care. The configuration options, again, none of this is rocket science. You should be able to change your PIN, better protection of link keys. Again, here's a TPM hook. It has to be a tie between trusted computing and Bluetooth, so there's my tie-in. If a device suddenly loses its link key, it's probably under attack. You know, this is probably the scenario outlined in that paper. To my knowledge, I don't think any device actually throws a security exception right now. Every device I've played with is just like, oh, you lost your key. We should try this again. Profile-specific guidance, headset and hands-free. You should be able to, again, from a device perspective, whitelist AT commands. There's certain AT commands that are never going to be set to a handset. There's just a sign of like protocol fuzzing occurring. OBEX file transfer should always have authentication, and it should always look for protocol fuzzing. Again, fuzzing. You can fuzz this stuff all day long and own it. File access, etc. Run it up the gut. Some of these attacks, when you run these attacks that like Tryphony.org has released, they stand out like a sore thumb. They're really dumb. I mean, again, they're good attacks, but common sense test says, well, duh, like that should never have happened. And there's no reason why we couldn't have signatures looking for these things and, hey, let's band-aid some security on it, shall we? If you look for someone trying to pull /telecom/pb.vcf, that's the universal location of your phone book, okay? PB, phone book. If you try to get that without authentication, ding, 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 someone's trying to do something nasty to you. Same for cal.vcs, that's your calendar file, dev info, boom. Once you see that, you should probably then go into some kind of defensive posture. These were all things that hopefully we were trying to get done with our little tool, and we slammed our head against our wall until it was bloody, so we didn't get it done. These are basically our functional requirements, if you will. Ability to scan connecting devices. This is an interesting idea, I think. If I have a relationship with a device and it's a headset, and then one day it stops being a headset and turns into a laptop and has all these extra capabilities, something strange is happening there. I should probably, it shouldn't happen. Like common sense says, duh, it shouldn't be like that. But nothing does this. Nothing scans back right now and looks. It should. In theory, it's everything I own, so who the hell cares if I'm scanning it? Bluetooth Authenticator, ha 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 ha, joke's on you, we didn't release anything. Eventually, Bluetooth.shmoo.com will have the source code. And like I said, we're focusing on IPC hooking these days. So, real quick, Summer of Code. This is a big gear shift. I'm evangelizing a notch. Google sponsored, or basically, how many people are familiar with Google Summer of Code? Handful. Google basically pays for hundreds and hundreds of open source projects every year to be written during the summertime by students who are looking for a job other than flipping burgers. And so these are all open source code, open source programs. Google puts in millions of dollars into this. Shmoo Group asked to be a sponsoring organization, and we were accepted for 4 projects. So real quick, I just want to go through the 4 projects that we have. The students have done a great job with this year, and I think that the projects are pretty interesting. The first is Firekeeper. This is a browser-level intrusion detection designed to block and detect malicious websites. Kind of neat, given Jeremiah's and some others' talks this weekend about actually how dangerous cross-site scripting can be. We all thought it was just kind of a joke, like, ha ha ha, I found another cross-site scripting attack. It turns out, ha ha ha, joke's on you, can actually do lots of malicious stuff. And so Firekeeper is our response to try to lock down at least Mozilla and Firefox to keep them secure. You IE users, you'll be waiting for Microsoft to do something for you. GPG Greasemonkey. We were going to use Greasemonkey, which is a real-time JavaScript rewriting of web pages to do encryption on Gmail and Yahoo and Hotmail and all that kind of thing. Turns out JavaScript doesn't really like calling native binaries, what with the security distinction between where JavaScript runs and where the rest of the stuff runs. So my student came to me one day and said, I think I'm going to have to implement GPG in JavaScript. No. I value your sanity as a student, and I don't think I want you to have to do that. So what we did instead was client-side mail encryption via Firefox extension instead. So with a Firefox extension, you can now do Gmail and Yahoo GPG encrypted email. Here's a screenshot that's super small and could be anything, but trust me, there's little encrypt and sign buttons at the top, which must mean it works. It's funny because when we started doing this, I'd seen a talk that Johnny Long had given, and he had these, it was a Hacking Hollywood talk, and he had these Gmail things where there were like new boxes on it and new functionality, and I thought he had used Greasemonkey. I'm like, dude, how'd you get all that new functionality to Gmail? He's like, Photoshop? Right. Because I had told my developer, like the student, to go contact Johnny, and I'm like, don't talk to him. So anyway, this is actually not a Photoshop. You can actually encrypt and sign email in Gmail now using this thing. 2 other projects we have, online rainbow tables lookups. We are hoping for drastically improved speed. We haven't been able to find that yet, but we do have an online web interface. It'll be online by the end of the summer. Basic web search capabilities, queuing. You get emails when the thing's done. We're looking for a DNS query interface so you can send hashes via DNS and query it back and get responses later. So if you happen to be in a pen testing environment where your client doesn't mind you sending clear text hashes and clear text passwords around looking how to break into systems, it's a great tool. Honestly, it's more cute than anything. I don't know who would ever use it, but the people that do, I want to talk to you. That's just fantastic. Open Security Framework. It's a framework to simplify network security analysis. Pubs are working on that. I honestly don't know what state that thing's in, but it's pretty groovy. All the links are on code.google.com/SOC if you want to check them out. So with that, any questions or things of that nature? Sir? The question is about GPG, the Google GPG thing. Yeah, we actually have a problem with that because Google will cache what you type in at first without encrypting it. So if you want to use it properly in Gmail, you have to just like basically paste in everything and then click encrypt really quick. And she's trying to find a way to block all the AJAX stuff that would cause it to actually go back and forth. And that was the last thing I knew of, and she was still working on that. So other questions or concerns? People are pulling eject real quick. So I'm going to recognize, yeah, I got 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah, we're out of time. All right, so if you have questions, come on up.